In 1959, a new secondary school opened in Shenandoah County, Virginia, named after one of the most brilliant tacticians and commanders in all of US military history. Not an unusual thing to name high schools for. Stonewall Jackson High School, which is fine until you remember who he fought for and why. He rebelled against this country and commanded Confederate armies in order that white enslavers continue to own human beings like property. It was no accident that a high school was named for him in Virginia in 1959. That was the height of that state's resistance to integration. And to name a school after him wasn't just history or heritage, it was a reminder of who belonged, who counted, who was good, and who wasn't. In July of 2020, a summer of pandemic and protest reminded the conscience of this country that it is a profound erasure of our actual history to give a place of honor to a man who murdered on behalf of enslavers. Not heritage, hate. And so in July of 2020, the school board renamed it Mountain View High School. Not an inspiring name, but a better one. This week, less than 4 years later, the new school board voted to change it back. And as one of the school board members said, explaining his vote, when you read about this man, Stonewall Jackson, when you read about who he was and what he stood for, his character, his loyalty, his leadership, how godly a man he was, those standards that he had were much higher than any leadership of the school system in 2020. And there is, in that statement, something at work that I think is worse than just error, and it's worse even than, I don't know if it's worse, but it's not as simple as just hate. For that board member, for the 4 out of 5 who voted for this, for the people who elected them on this issue, reason and the fact of what happened had been displaced by a belief in a mythic past, a time when things were better and more pure, more wholesome, more right than they are today. Once, according to this mindset, things were good and order was as it should be, and today we live in a fallen world from that, but it can be great again. Jason Stanley, in his brilliant and accessible book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them, describes fascism not in terms of a political party or a set of governing principles. It's not an economic modality. It's not a method for interpreting the law. It is a technique for gaining power. It's a rhetoric. It's a way of speaking, and a set of assumptions behind that way of speaking. And because its power comes in part from the way that it shapes common sense notions of what is ordinary and right in our world, I'm going to attempt to walk you through Stanley's 10 attributes of fascism as if they were common sense. I'm going to attempt not to say this dripping with sarcasm. Here we go. Once we were great, and now we aren't because they took that away from us. And people won't tell you the truth about that reality. Teachers and medias and intellectuals won't tell you the truth, but you can feel it. You know that this is true. The fact is that when things were good, there was a hierarchy to the world with good people on top And you're one of those good people. And you should be on top. But they took that from you. They took that from you, and then they turned upside down the whole world of what's right and wrong. They talk about law and order being for equality and justice, but that can't be true because they have perverted the whole meaning of equality and justice. The real meaning of order is for the right people to be in charge. For the right people to safeguard our women and children. And I guess this part is just for the men in the room. I'm trying to keep the sarcasm out. Law and order is there to safeguard the threat to our families, the threat to women and children who want to take away what is good and natural and pure. They call it equality, but what they mean is taking away motherhood and your children. Because there are good people in the world and there are bad people in the world. There is us and there is them. Fascism isn't a political party or a platform. It's a technique to gain power. It is a rhetoric, a way of speaking, a set of assumptions behind what's said. It's not a political party, it's a political style. And the point of getting familiar with this, the point of listening for this, of understanding the twists and turns of this, is not just to see it. Identifying fascist speech and thought is not like identifying a bird in the wild. Oh, look, I haven't seen that. There it goes. That's not it. Identifying this illiberal way of being in the world is to become aware of it as a tactic in order to explicitly counter it and work against it. Now, there's no argument you win by saying you're a fascist. There's no one who you're going to say that to. Oh my gosh, I was just waiting for someone to explain what was going on inside me. I won't be in. That is not a thing that happens. But when someone tells a story of a mythic past in which we were on top and they were in their rightful place, you can notice that and challenge it and say something as simple as, I don't believe that. It's hard to undo that story of the past, that simple story, because in fact, the past is messy and complicated and not immediately obvious. And no one is all good or all bad then or now. In the past, our ancestors had ideals we share. All men are created equal and also lived in horrific ways. Jefferson owned human beings while writing that. There's not a simple story that encompasses both of those things, but the mythic past is simple because it's not really about the facts of the past. It's about a set of feelings that we have in the present, that we are the right ones, the pure ones. We are the ones who stand for character and loyalty and leadership and godliness, just like Stonewall Jackson. The mythic past, where the great and the dominant group ruled over the others, is the starting point for fascisms around the world. It's a story in the past about how things are supposed to be in the future, how things will become again once you belong and join in and are a part of and are restored to your rightful place. That is the story people are pledging allegiance to when they hang Confederate flags in front of their homes here in Boulder County. I've seen them. This is the story that Christian nationalists in Colorado mean when they say Christianity and nationalism. Once things were right. White men ruled over women and everyone, and things were good. And surely you want to go back to things being good. This is at the heart of the backlash to critical race theory, which in its simplest possible version is the proposition that the story of Black Americans should be told as part of the story of America. The mythic past is at the heart of resistance that dismantles diversity, equality, and inclusion initiatives. Those perspectives don't belong among us. Those perspectives, those people challenge the myth of the glorious past. They must not be true. That the facts disagree with belief merely demonstrates the facts are wrong. Fascist politics, writes Stanley, makes room for the study of myth as fact. And in that ideology, the function of the education system is to glorify the mythic past, to elevate the achievements of members of the nation and obscure the perspectives and the histories of the people who don't belong. Obscuring the perspectives of the people who don't belong is why Florida banned teachers from talking about sexual orientation and gender identity. A lesbian kindergarten teacher can't, under the law, clearly talk about her relationship with her wife. A straight second grade teacher can't unambiguously, under the law, talk about their student with two dads. But to the fascist worldview, the fact and reality of those diverse experiences isn't true because those don't count, those don't matter. There is an us and a them. And that's not because it's a conspiracy. That's not because it's a political project. It's because there is a deeply held belief that this really is how the world works. Stanley says part of what fascist politics does is get people to disassociate from reality. You get them to sign on to this fantasy version of reality, usually a nationalist narrative about the decline of the country and the need for a strong leader to return it to greatness. And from then on, their anchor isn't the world around them anymore. All politics uses propaganda. At its simplest, that word just means persuasion. But to the fascist style, propaganda is used in service, it's language used in service of dividing the pure us from the impure them. Take corruption. Corruption in that style is about the corruption of purity, not the corruption of the law. So officially, the fascist politician denunciation of corruption sounds like a denunciation of political corruption. But the talk, that speech, that conversation is instead intended to evoke corruption in the sense of usurpations of the traditional order. What's gone wrong is not that the law has been violated, but the purity of us has been violated. You don't need the law to tell you that. You know this in you. This is why Stonewall Jackson's standards were so much higher than the 2020 school board. To say that renaming schools after Confederate generals is a fascistic act of inventing a mythic past is not to say, and this is tricky, nuance is hard these days, it feels, is not to say that the school board or the voters are fascist or that there's some conspiracy in that county to impose fascist rules. Fascism, it's not like a switch that flips. It's not a binary. It's not a state of being and you are or you aren't. It's a style. It's a way of thinking and speaking and shaping a common sense understanding of the world. It doesn't need to be a secret intentional conspiracy towards power. It can be honestly believed as a worldview. It's a story that people belong to, Once upon a time, things were as they should be. And they can be again, and you can be part of that. It's an ideology. All people are not equal. There is a natural order of importance to the world. And that's why the right of a woman to control her own body is not as important as the right of a man to control her body. That's why, speaking of the rights of queer people to equal protection under the law, surely can't mean the same thing as equal protection for straight people, who are naturally more important. This is why fascism is a path to power. It's a hierarchy of worth that you once had but was taken away, and I will give it back to you, says that leader. Once you believe that you matter most and they have taken that away, once that's the cornerstone, you don't need to listen to anything anymore. The intellectuals are lying to you. The history is rewritten. It's your leader who's telling you the truth. And again, arguing over whether someone is or isn't a fascist misses the point. This is a method of communication that appeals to a style of believing. And our work this year, especially, is to notice it and name it, which can be as simple as saying, I don't agree. This is maybe not the usual Mother's Day sermon. Though this is what my mom raised me to talk about. It's maybe not a usual Mother's Day sermon, but the undoing of a them and an us is deep in the bones of our religious tradition. Julia Ward Howe, abolitionist and suffragette, spoke to the 1893 World Parliament of Religion. She did it in good Unitarian fashion. She said, I need not stand here to repeat any definition of what religion is. I think you will all say that it is aspiration, the pursuit of the divine in the human. But I think nothing is religion which puts one individual absolutely above others. And surely nothing is religion which puts one sex above others. And any religion which will sacrifice a certain set of human beings for the enjoyment or aggrandizement or advantage of another is no religion. Any religion which sacrifices women to the brutality of men is no religion. The fascist style of power and politics emerges and reemerges in every generation like cyclical broods of cicadas. Underground for years, it's not that they're not there, you just don't see them. They don't burst from nowhere and return to nothing. They're always here, and resistance meets that in every generation. Mother's Day, as it's celebrated today, has roots in the early 20th century as an affirmation and celebration of the domestic role of women, but its roots go further back than that, into the 1870s. Its roots are not in the celebration of traditional wives, subservient helpmates to men whose job is to protect her from a world she is incapable of facing. Its roots in the 1870s are Julia Ward Howe, writing a Mother's Day proclamation for peace. And she says this, she says, arise then, women of this day, arise all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have questions answered by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands will not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity and mercy and patience. From the voice of a devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, the sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession. Which is to say, in every line, a century and a half ago, let us not be content to be lied to. Let us not be content to be us, better than them. Let us not believe when we're told that that's just the common sense understanding of how things really are. Let's name it and undo it. The past, like the future, is for every one of us. Amen.